Okay, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Glad you made it to our new location. Um, welcome. Actually, just in case, no, right there. Yeah. Okay. Something. Trust me, there's something up there. Oh, okay. There we go. Gracepoint. There we go. So, welcome to our Gracepoint service. I just wanted to actually, just in case you were wondering, what's Gracepoint? Because I thought we were on Coin or A2F. Well, this church is called Gracepoint. Just in case you're wondering what our doctrinal beliefs were, like if you are, aware of those kinds of issues, we're actually part of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the biggest denomination in America by a huge margin. And I don't mean that to say, like, look, we're so big, it doesn't really matter. But all that is to say that our doctrinal beliefs are actually sort of the run-of-the-mill mainline Baptist doctrine of the Southern Baptist Convention. But we are sort of unusual in that we're a church born out of college campuses, and we decided to actually keep doing college ministry because we kind of came out of this Berkeley campus, and then we said, wait a minute, this is pretty, college ministry is pretty awesome, and we actually kind of grew out of that whole passion and the community that got formed around that. So that's sort of what makes us kind of unusual, I think, among the regular churches out there. So, by the way, this Willard Auditorium is going to be the regular place of worship on Sundays, and this is where we usually meet. Although this is the first time I'm speaking this direction. Usually it goes that direction because there's a stage there, but this is kind of closer and homier, and I like this. Okay. So we'll try to fix the different, dimness issue, but if you can't read it, just trust that what I'm saying is actually from the Bible there. So, yeah. All right. So, wanted to kind of do a little visual recap of what we've been talking about through Exodus so far. Can you see this? Okay. Okay. So here's Pharaoh. Okay. There's Pharaoh right there, and Pharaoh is in a bubble of himself. He's kind of disconnected from others, including disconnected from God, right? And when there's Israelites or Hebrews that are coming up, then he feels threatened by that. So then, he has swords and he basically oppresses them. So that's one path, in a way, out of that fear-driven self-protection comes this kind of life. And out of him comes the culture of, maybe you can call it culture of death. The River Nile where people are thrown into, and ultimately, it ends in death, right? So that's one path. I guess this is the conspiracy of death. All along, though, there's actually another line that gets formed. There's Shifra and Pua that says no to Pharaoh. How do they do that? Well, they because they're looking up, They're looking at God. They're connected to God. Pharaoh has disconnected himself from God, from history, from those things, but they're connected. So Shifra and Pua says no, and out of that path comes like a protection of Moses in a way, and here's another, Moses' mom and Moses' sister, and including Pharaoh's daughter, all to protect. And that's another line. Moses gets kind of carried along and sustained by this other line. Let's consider that conspiracy of love. That's another line. Those are the two lines, and that's so. I think that kind of encapsulates what we've been talking so far. And you might be wondering, like, why it was so short. Why didn't you do that in the first place? Why did it take 2 messages? It just does. Okay, it just does, right? So that kind of brings us to where Moses is now. And think about that. He's a slave class. But because of some incredible luck, so he thinks, he's living a life of privilege. He's going to Pharaoh University. You know, he's eating the finest palace foods, like 5-star, you know, Yelp. You know, it's just, if you don't rate it 5 stars, then you get killed. Like it's that kind of a situation, you know. So people in that situation where they made it, normally they cling to that privilege with desperation, and desperately want to disassociate themselves from their lowly background. You know, if you're the first one in your extended family, your entire extended family, to somehow make it, you achieve the American dream, you're successful. Oh man, you don't want to give that up. You will cling to it. But Moses does something very unusual. Exodus 2. One day, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. Look at this, right? His people. Who's his people? You know, because he was raised by his own mother, he probably learned of his origin from her, right? Like, oh, you're not Egyptian, you're actually Hebrew. But why should he self-identify himself with the Hebrews, the slave class? Because he has no memory of spending time with the slave class. He'd grown up all his life in Pharaoh's household. Right? Later, actually, Moses is confused by some other people as being an Egyptian, which means that physically he must have not looked so differently from the Egyptians, you know, so that people would actually confuse him as an Egyptian. So he could have easily gone the other way. He could have said, well, I'm with Pharaoh. You know, I'm with the powerful, I'm with the successful. No. But the fact that he sees them as his people, that was an intentional choice that he was making. In the New Testament, it talks about Moses' decision in this way. Hebrews 11 says, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God. Right? He chooses to be mistreated. He aligns himself with the people of God. And in so doing, he takes on the burdens of the people of God, the slave class actually, and makes it his problem. Right? Now, in a way, it is sort of like these two paths that I talked about, right? One is the way of Pharaoh, and it's filled with heroes of that culture. There's heroes in that culture, I guess, right? The powerful, the successful, the untouchable, the ones who protect themselves successfully. And then there's the other conspiracy, another line that is formed, the conspiracy of suffering love. You know, a conspiracy of suffering love. And they have their own heroes. On this line, you know, they have their own heroes, such as Shiphrah and Puah, and Moses' mom. And, you know, this is what life of faith looks like in a way, right? In Hebrews 11:24, it actually talks about it. It's a faith. It's faith. It is to say, I refuse to line up over here. I refuse to line up in this line of death. I'm actually lining up along this line, the conspiracy of love line. That's my people. That's the people of God. Not because you just want to join a cozy group, but even to be mistreated along with them and to take on their burdens. This is the picture of Christian identity, you know, to choose to line up right here, you know, and join in being the band of co-conspirators united by love. And that's the, you know, by heart for the lost, right? To desire to rescue others out of this current of death, you know. So who are your people? Let me ask you that. Your people, my people. Who are they? Which line do you stand? And just because you identify yourself as a Christian, though, it doesn't mean that you're in the right line. Because this is regarding your heart, the affections of your heart. You know? And in a way, I think Christian discipleship that we need to go through, we all need to go through, especially during college years, is the process of choosing to line up, go from the lower line right there, you know, go from here to here, to choose and learn to line up among these people and learn how to live and be as the people of God. That's Christian discipleship. So if you're a Christian here, I really want to highly encourage you, get into a discipleship group and learn to say in your heart, that's my people. Right? So Moses identifies with the enslaved class, and then he sees an Egyptian abusing and beating up a Hebrew. So then he looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hit him in the sand. Okay, so he does this thing. Now there's a temptation to moralize this passage and say, oh no, like Moses did this out of this brash anger and he did a bad thing, and he's like, oh no, you know. So that's how the Disney movie, Prince of Egypt, that's how it portrays it. Moses is like kind of mistakenly like pushes him off of like a scaffolding, like he's like, oh no, you know. It wasn't a mistake. Okay, he saw it, he did it. That would be actually a real, if you moralize this passage, I think there will be kind of a slight misreading of this passage. Because from the perspective of the Hebrew reader, the language of this passage paints Moses as a heroic deliverer. Right? He struck the Egyptian. He struck down the Egyptian. That is actually the same language that is used to describe what God ultimately does. Moses is portrayed as one who is a rescuer. The problem was that it was far insufficient, of course. But still, it was the right thing. Right? One thing is clear. Through this action, though, he makes a very decisive break from the line of Egypt. Right? He makes a decisive break from Egypt. And really, he's saying, I am on this line. This is my people. When he went out the next day, behold, two Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why do you strike your companion? So Moses continues this kind of rescuer campaign. Notice like the theme about Moses' anger, his frustration, what comes through, right? He has moral discernment. He's very clear, like the man in the wrong. He goes, okay, that guy's in the wrong. Clearly he's in the wrong. And then he's basically saying, hey, you shouldn't be striking your fellow Hebrew. It's your companion. Right? He wants to rescue the person who's being beaten. But then things go really badly for Moses. He answered, who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. The Bible is just incredibly succinct to a fault. It's like, just says, oh, this happened, and then Pharaoh tried to kill him. Pharaoh sought to kill Moses, so Moses fled. So succinct, but think about what just happened, It's the worst day of his entire life. What a blow. I mean, he was trying to rescue his people. And then he gets rejected big time. And then his stepfather, Pharaoh, the source of all the comfort in his life, tries to kill him. Wants to kill him. And now he needs to leave the whole thing. All the comforts of Egypt. Everyone that he's ever known. He has to leave. Including his mom. Including Pharaoh's daughter. Including everyone. Right? It's done. So where is he? He goes to a Midianite desert. Leaving everything he's known so far. That's what you get for lining up with the people of God. That's what you get for taking up other people's burdens. Trying to be a rescuer for people who's being beaten. What were you thinking? That could be a response, I think, right? Bad things, really bad things happened to Moses. So was that the wrong decision? Now, I think there's a lesson here. Even if you try to do the right thing, you can and sometimes you will experience rejection. Right? Even very painful rejection. That doesn't mean, though, that what you did was the wrong thing. Right? Many of our ethical reasoning in the modern days actually are often muddled because we're so results-oriented, I think. We think, oh, if I said something, if I did something, and the result was bad, then I shouldn't have done that. Right? Well, in one sense, I think results are, I don't want to totally dismiss all results. Like, results are a helpful calibration. I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't care at all about the effect of our actions. But, things are complicated when it comes to doing things that are morally right or morally wrong. I mean, if you talk to a friend about a bad path that he's going down, you see him destroying himself. So you talk to him, like, seriously, like, hey, man, I don't think you should go down that path at all. What are you doing? And then that friend gets offended and pushes you out of his life completely. Oh, that's tough, right? And then, so what do you do with that? Well, maybe that bad result can prompt you to consider, like, was my tone too much? Was it wrong timing? Maybe maybe it was wrong timing. Maybe the tone was too much, or maybe it was the right thing to do despite the results. You know, when someone blows a whistle on some corruption, like a whistleblower, right? Oh man, the personal ramification of that action is pretty bad, but that doesn't mean that it was the wrong thing. Sometimes you just got to accept the fact that even when you do the right thing, you can get some bad results. And you have to be at peace with that. Accept that. So he's sitting there by the well, rightfully dejected, I guess, you know. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. 7 daughters. There's a priest in Midian who had 7 daughters. I have 2 daughters. And that's hard enough. 7. But you know what? That's way better than 7 sons. That's all I gotta say. Okay, so. And they drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove. The shepherds, suddenly these mean male shepherds come and drive them away. All the work that's like, now the trough is all filled with water. Now they're like doing this thing, like, get out of here. And then they try to fill their, feed their own flock. But Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. So check this out. Like Moses is sitting there at the well, probably feeling pretty depressed, and rightfully so. And then he sees these rough shepherds trying to drive the women away from all the work that they did. And then the scene just makes him upset. Right? It makes him upset. So Moses stands up and he saves them. And even after that, serves them by watering their flock. Like, okay, let me just, here. You guys rest. You guys must be traumatized. And he waters the flock. Man, you would think after that fiasco in Egypt, after that rejection and fiasco in Egypt, Moses should have learned his lesson to not get involved in other people's problems. But this is Moses' character. It's a beautiful character. He doesn't allow his own sorrow to cause him to cave in on himself. I think was it the last message where I talked about this, like the mirror. I talked about this mirror, right? Where here's the world, here's you, but in between the world and you, there is a mirror where you see a reflection of yourself. And then you see the world kind of dimly because of that, sort of dim, because you're constantly interacting with your self-image. Yeah, I think this is especially true when someone experiences something really painful or traumatic. Especially when that happens, all you see, you don't see this at all actually, all you see is the mirror and the pain and the rejection. And we can get like that very easily. And I think maybe some of you have already experienced some moments in your life like that. Moses could have felt very sorry for himself and say to himself, never again. Never again, But Moses, he like saves them and he waters the flock and he serves others at this state. Somehow he remains other-centered. He sees others. He looks at this and goes, oh, right? He gets angry. That shouldn't happen. Somehow he remains other-centered. He actually sees the world. He refuses to cave into himself. But by doing that, think about it. Think about what happens to Moses' heart as he looks beyond the mirror and looks at the world and goes toward it. Well, his heart could have shriveled up, because of all the rejection, but his heart expands. And as he reaffirms his identity as a rescuer and a protector. And I think that's a very important insight about how we can respond to pain in our lives. Maybe some of us had some past pains and you feel stuck. You're still dwelling in your past pains and past hurts. And you know what? We've learned to shut the rest of the world out. That's how one way to deal with it is say, I'm not going to deal with this. I am just going to interact in this right here. That's all I'm going to interact. And it's understandable, right? We feel the need to protect ourselves. But one way that God can heal you of that past pain and past rejection is to become the protector of others, to rescue others. So look around. Open your eyes. look around and you will see someone in need. Instead of just looking here, kind of somehow do a little, light doesn't bend, but imagine it can, just like, and you see someone in need. Someone you can serve, and you can move toward them. When they came home to their father Reuel, he said, "How is it that you have come home so soon today?" So the 7 daughters come home. They said, "An Egyptian," okay, that's interesting. They think he's an Egyptian. "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock." And then this father of 7 daughters is like, "Wait, you met a man who is courageous and who's tough enough and skilled enough to fight off multiple attackers, and he's helpful. He does house chores." And the father's like, ding, right? Like, ding. And then he said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him so that he may eat bread. Invite him over, man, Ugh. What is wrong with you?" So they do. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses' daughter Zipporah. Get married. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land." So he gets married to one of his daughters, has a son, names his son Gershom, which means, by the way, exile. I mean, for Hebrews, I don't know, man. Names contain a lot of meaning, right? At a different time in the scripture, a woman gives birth to a son just when the Ark of the Covenant gets captured, and she names her son as she's dying. She names her son Ichabod, which means the glory of God has departed. And that's your name, Hey, departed glory, come here, right? It's like, all right. So every time Moses calls his son, "Hey, exile, come on, Hey, sojourner, come on." That's what he was saying, right? So was he bitter about that? Is he like really bitter? But it's kind of interesting. He was content to dwell with the man. There isn't this like, not really, right? Not really. So this is the interesting thing about Moses' identity, and that gets played out throughout Exodus, and especially, even to the calling of Moses at the burning bush. The identity of Moses seems to be at issue here. Is Moses part of Pharaoh's family? No. He was, not anymore. Is Moses a Hebrew? Well, that's how he would like to. He kind of self-identified that way, but he's been rejected by his people for doing good. Egyptian? Well, the daughters initially thought that, but he's not. He's rejected by the Egyptians too. He has a Midianite family now. He has a Midianite wife, but he's not a Midianite either. So who is he? Who is he? And Moses' self-conception is, "I'm a sojourner in a foreign land." That's how he sees himself. He owned that identity. He seems to own that identity. He embraces that identity. And Hebrews in the New Testament, actually looking back at Moses, it characterizes it in this way. It says, "But having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they is including Moses and others, right? Moses and other prophets, right? They were strangers and exiles on the earth." They acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth because they knew that this world is not their home. And the life of faith is the identity of a person of faith is I'm a stranger and exile on the earth. My home is not here. First Peter chapter 2 exhorts all Christians by saying this, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul." Sojourner, exile, that's the Christian identity that we're called to embrace. We're strangers and exiles on the earth. That picture of the two paths, right? In a way, the two paths are, the one path is the path of the world, of power, of fear, of protection, of the self, of death, ultimately leading in shriveling up and dying, And then there's a conspiracy of love, of rescuers. In a way, this line right here, the conspiracy of love, is, I would say, it's the line of the exiles. You know, that's often, I think, our experience as we choose to identify ourselves with God's people. We become, a sojourner. The world becomes, in a way, a foreign land, as the New Testament writers would actually tell us. That's who we are. We've become sojourners and exiles in a sense, and that's, what we are called to embrace. And I think we can and will still face some rejection from the world as we identify ourselves with the people of God, just like Moses did. We have testimonies of people in this room who've become genuine followers of Christ in college, and then they get rejected from their old friends. Maybe even get rejected by parents even, which is really painful. Right? But in those moments, let's own this identity. I'm a sojourner in a foreign land. My home is not here. Right? Now, all this talk about identity, I know that it can sound kind of sometimes abstract, but how that plays out can be very concrete. And so I wanted to share some stories. Now, if you embrace this identity as a sojourner and exile in the world, that means you got to actually kind of close some doors, right? I know that it really goes against the whole leave all options open kind of mantra or ethos in our modern generation, but it means that you choose to align yourself not with the comfortable, successful people of the world, but with the people of God who follow Jesus on the cross, right? That's going to make some difference. For me, right after I graduated, or as in my senior year, actually, second semester of my senior year, my uncle, who was living in Korea, had just become the president of the IBM research office in South Korea. And he offered me a $100K salary. Back then, in the mid-90s, that was a lot, okay? So now it's like, you're like, hey, this is just Bay Area, That was a lot. And that was with the housing and car thrown in. So that was pure cash. I didn't have any, it was nothing, it's just pure, right? So man, according to the world's ways, why wouldn't I take that? I'm so lucky. I was right there at the right time, at the right place, just as I'm graduating. My uncle's like, hey, you're a programmer. I'm looking for, boom. And I grew up poor, man. I grew up in government subsidized housing. So why, that would be crazy for me not to take that. It's the American dream. Except it will be happening in Korea. So, kind of like something like that, But I said, no, thank you. I closed that door a while ago. I already decided that I'm not in the line of going to the highest bidder. Maybe it was easy for me to decide that because, who wants to leave the Bay Area to go to Korea during the 90s, So maybe I shouldn't take too much credit for that, But the point is, Moses didn't keep all options open. He closed some doors to Egypt, I wanted to show some other students' sharings. There were these, few students that we picked 3 of how they concretely made certain decisions to close some doors or maybe to choose a certain path of a way of being that's actually might be more relevant. Okay, let's go ahead and I'll show that. So that's Emma.
Hi, my name is Emma and I'm a junior in Coin. I want to share about my peers freshman year. I felt pretty disconnected from everyone in my life group. It seemed like they all had common shared interests that I didn't have, or they just made friends with each other long before I did, and I was coming in kind of late to the friendship game. But despite this, I tried to go to every single life group meeting whenever it happened, and even though I didn't necessarily feel like I was very connected, even later on, God was able to use that time and able to grow for me deeper relationships with my peers and my friends that I never would have expected freshman year.
All right, and here's Johnny, May 12. I don't know why, his video quality is like from a mission trip or something. I don't know. So, but But let's try to hear him out, okay?
So I grew up as a Taoist. So there was actually a lot of pushback from my family when I first began to realize that the Christian God could be more than just a myth. After much internal struggle, I found that there was just too much evidence for a loving God and for Jesus Christ. And that if it really were true that Christ died for our sins, then the most loving thing I could do for my family would be to follow this perfectly loving God himself and to identify with his church. Turns out that this was the case. And though the initial wave of disapproval was rough, I find that I'm now actually closer to my family than I was before, due to the way that God has been shaping me as a servant, as a son, and even as a peacemaker for some long-standing family disputes.
All right. And finally, Yelena.
Hi everyone, my name is Yelena. I'm a junior here at Coin, and I wanted to share a little bit about something that I decided to give up for another. I always thought that I wanted to work for a consulting firm. I thought that was the job for me. I get to travel, I get to eat really good food, and stay in like really nice hotels. But this past summer, I got to work with a really big name consulting firm through this internship, and I realized that the lifestyle was a lot less glamorous than I imagined it to be. I was always traveling, which I thought I liked, but I realized was actually very lonely. I felt like the lives of the people that I loved and cared about, my friends, they were moving forward and without me, and so I felt very lonely and physically exhausted. And so I ultimately ended up deciding to give up my full-time job offer in order to pursue and invest in these relationships that actually lasted and actually mattered.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think I introduced everybody as students, but Johnny's not a student, right? So, okay. You are? Okay, yeah. Just look like, yeah. So anyway. Yeah, I think these range from very small decisions to really larger decisions. And if the larger decisions sound kind of frightening, I understand. But the point is, actually life is made of such moments when you close doors. Sometimes the most meaningful moments in life are when you close doors. Like marriage. When I said yes to Sarah, I became an exile to 3 billion women, right? So it's like, I'm an exile. Right. But I did it gladly. When you chose this college, like, you're closing doors. And to constantly try to leave doors open, that's kind of misery. You have to move forward, closing certain doors. So I just want to ask you on an application level, are all options still kind of open for you? Regarding entertainment choices. Are some choices of entertainment, are there some choices that you would consider to be not available to you because of your identity as a Christian? What you do for fun, what kind of parties you go to. Are there some choices and doors that you're closing because of your identity as a Christian and saying, the rest of the world can do that, but I'm not really part of that because I belong to another kingdom. And because of that, where you close the door, are there things like that? I hope there is. Because, Christians who want to be just like the rest of the world, who try so hard to communicate to everyone, hey, I'm a Christian, but don't worry, I'm just like you. No difference. I'm just like everybody else. No. You're supposed to be a sojourner. You're supposed to be a stranger and an exile in this world. Separated from the world. When the world sees a Christian who is just like everyone else in the world, man, they don't find Christianity compelling at all. If following Jesus makes such a little difference, then why would I be interested in that? What they see is hypocrisy, actually. Right? So in a way, Moses had to leave Egypt and become a sojourner who was separated from Egypt in order to later rescue people from Egypt. Does that make sense? This flight from Egypt that he took, all the rejection that Moses faced, it was really painful. But that was exactly what needed to happen in order for him to rescue the Hebrews. So there's a sovereignty of God in all this that we can trust. Even though the pain, the rejection that you might face might feel painful, like, oh my gosh, am I losing my friends? Am I losing my family even, like my parents who are against me, my Christian faith, and trust in the sovereignty of God. Because during the next few decades in the Midianite desert, God trains Moses in a profound way. So the lesson here is that you can't be a rescuer if you're flowing down the currents of the Nile. Meaning, like, if you can't be a rescuer of the world if you're deeply embedded into the culture and the ways of the world. You have to be, in a way, separate, different from the world. So I want to encourage you, if you're a Christian, you can take on the identity of Moses on multiple levels. Right? Moses, the path of Moses was the one who was saved. That was the first. That was Moses' name. That's his name. Who was delivered out of the water. And then he becomes an exile in Egypt, from Egypt. And he becomes a sojourner. So take on that identity as a sojourner, and then becomes the one who can save others. Right? This process, this acceptance of this identity is actually, I think is very crucial. Likewise, we're the ones who've been saved, And as I invite up the band, I just want to give you a kind of a final exhortation here. We can become people who can save others by the power of God, right? By the power of God. So I pray that you would stand in the line of rescuers, But if you own the identity of being a sojourner and exile in this world, we can become rescuers, right? Bringing the good news of God's forgiveness. I hope that you can look upon the people of God, these band of exiles, and say, that's my people. And take on the burden and the mission of God along with them. And that's my prayer for you.